Three, two, one. What's up, fellas? I got Ivan from Collective on the pod. Uh, Absolutely lovely guy, great podcast, great educator. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of did a lot of it, but yeah. So I'm Ivan, Ivan De La Rosa. I'm part of a Marxist-Leninist network on YouTube and TikTok called Collective. We have a podcast, we have video essays. Welcome all the new creators to come in and post content. Think of it as like a collective ownership, no pun intended, of the subscriber count.
Yeah, I like Collective TV. You know, the education is great, the conversations are great. And there's also the first podcast I was invited to. So, I really got to thank you guys for that. Um,
Oh,
but
I didn't know it was your first. You're a natural at it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
What we're here to talk about is the ECP, which was recently announced. I'm not sure when this video will come out, but the ECP, as of this recording, was just recently announced the American Communist Party and MAGA communism in general, and just how much of a clown ideology it is. Ivan just released an excellent video on Collective YouTube channel that you should absolutely check out about it. But can you just briefly, for those who don't know, who have never been terminally online and heard of MAGA communism, can you just briefly explain what MAGA communism is?
Right. Well, I think you used the perfect term, terminally online. So, MAGA communism is essentially, there's two perspectives you can look at it. Both one is correct, one is incorrect. The incorrect position is that it is a offshoot of communism, of Marxist-Leninism, that seeks to utilize the energy that was seen from the American working class when Donald Trump got elected and convert that energy from reactionaries to Marxists. The problem is, so that sounds good in theory, but the problem is that is not what these people are actually seeking to do. What is really happening, the correct understanding of MAGA communism, is that it's the same premise, except they're not seeking to actually convert these people to Marxism. They're seeking to continue keeping these people within their reactionary tendencies with a communist aesthetic in order to grift and seek power. It is a very online movement. It is a far-right movement. They enjoy very little support in real life, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. The primary criticism and motif of MAGA communism is that it primarily targets and seeks to gain the leverage and support of the white worker in the United States, which as communists, we know we're going to have to work with everybody, no matter the race, creed, color, religion. But it's targeting whiteness in order to platform whiteness, in order to keep it within its supremacy within this settler state that we live in, the United States, as opposed to breaking down the barriers and breaking down white supremacy and having people of different races, different backgrounds coexisting as a proletariat. Instead, we're going to keep the white worker in its dominant spot within the supremacist system.
Yeah, MAGA communism, just the name alone is such an odd contradiction. Because how do communists understand nationalism, right? Stalin put it very well in the nationalities question. I forget the title of the text, but basically he said that
The national question
is a manufactured thing about a historical group of people by a bourgeois to distract people from class struggle, but that it is important in our current mode of politics, but only if it is liberatory. And imperial core nationalism, I am so sorry, MAGA is not a liberatory nationalism. It is a very reactionary nationalism. Liberatory nationalism is in the global south. Liberatory nationalism is Viet Minh nationalism against America. Liberatory nationalism is Burkinabe nationalism against the IMF. Liberatory nationalism is Kenyan nationalism, as we're seeing their protest against William Ruto right now. That is a liberatory nationalism. But America, everything America stands for, and everything the American flag stands for, and everything MAGA stands for is opposed to communism. It is white supremacy, it is slavery, it is indigenous genocide. To wave the American flag is to wave the flag that killed Native Americans, that enslaved millions, that did military interventions in the name of capital. And so it is such an odd contradiction, right? And it is a contradiction that cannot be reconciled.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Beautifully put. So, I think I mentioned Donald Trump in my original explanation, but maybe I've been up for a while. So yeah, so like MAGA being Make America Great Again is using the idea that somebody like Donald Trump, who is a grifter, is a liar, is a capitalist, who proposed themselves to be against the capitalist establishment, who really is only just trying to reintegrate his own, his own wealth, his own fame, his own posse further into the capitalist system, is trying to convince these people that somehow he is against that very system that they're supporting. It is extremely similar to what happened as the Weimar Republic in Germany in the 30s was failing, where you had people basically in a limbo, right?
Yep.
Because as we understand, capitalism, as it begins to decay, as it always does,
Yep.
you're going to see two different drum beats for revolution. You are either going to see, and remember, so like revolution, whenever people hear the word revolution, they think of war, civil war. But when we literally just look at the word, it means a great change. So there's two drum beats of revolution. There is either a socialist revolution or a fascist revolution, because capitalism is very unnatural. So as people intrinsically understand as human animals that like we cannot keep living in the system, and as capitalism falls apart, what do I mean by that? Rising prices, economic hardship, housing shortage, now climate disaster, things like that, things that have been going on for over the last 100 years, as it did in Germany in the 30s. As people's quality of life is deteriorating, they are seeking to secure their future, their position, as all humans and all animals try to do. They try to survive. So people who are not already educated in Marxism, in communism, who are vulnerable to the whispers of fascism, primarily because, look at the United States, like the education's very poor, communism is demonized, so people get this idea of the mythical past, that in fascism, if we could just go back, we could just make Germany great again, if we could just make America great again, your problems will be solved. Really all it is a double, triple down on capitalism more overtly and with a bigger, badder jackboot, as opposed to communism, which seeks to liberate the worker.
It is textbook. No, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm just saying that like in the United States, which is a settler colony, as you were saying, does represent indigenous genocide. Like these things aren't for debate anymore. We understand now how this country was founded and created and what supports it. When you continue to wave the American flag, not only are you signifying to those who are victimized by the settler state that we support the settler state, you are continuing to victimize even your own fellow white worker, because all these people who happen to end up falling into fascism and reactionaries are people, for the most part, who were just seeking another dollar, who were seeking what about my family? What about where am I going to get bread? Gas is too expensive. I can't pay my mortgage. And then all of a sudden you have Nazis, because these people are going to do anything they can to survive. They're doing what they think is correct, as opposed to moving towards a liberation movement. So you're not only damning everybody, people who look like you and I, by waving the American flag, by waving the MAGA communism flag, you're damning your own fellow poor white worker. So it's just such a silly and yet scary ideology.
Yeah, it is really what Donald Trump does is textbook fascism, right? Well, when did fascism arise? During the Great Depression, when capitalism, quote unquote, failed, right? And what fascism did was it took these left-wing concepts, these left-wing words, these left-wing aesthetics, and used them to preserve the bourgeois state, preserve the bourgeois grip on power. And it is amazing how people keep on falling for these ideas over and over and over again. And what is so poignant about fascism that you just have to point out is that fascism always, yes, does attempt to improve the lives of one section of the working class, and that is usually a white working class, that is usually an enmeshed working class, that is an in-group, and there is an out-group. And it says, we're going to improve the lives of Germans over Jews, right? And Slavs. We're going to improve the lives of Italians over Ethiopians. And by doing that, it divides the working class. It does the job of the bourgeois, and it steals a lot of the momentum, steam from leftism, from communism, from actual movements. It's just it's so fucking stupid. And of course, yeah, it is. And of course, we have to mention that when American communists use pictures of slave owners like George Washington and Benjamin Franklin wasn't, but Thomas Jefferson, and say they would have been communists, it is ridiculous. And it's such a stupid fucking ideology. I think that it's so goofy.
It predicates, again, this idea of the mythical past. So I pointed out in the video that I made a couple days ago that a lot of the when the ACP announced their nonsense and all their fans were going nuts on Twitter, and I say fans, not members, for a reason, but we'll get into that later. But there was this one picture they posted of George Washington with like the glitch aesthetic and trying to make him look like a badass, and it's like he doesn't represent anything for me or really any of us here now, white, black, whatever, unless you are specifically trying to continue the Manifest Destiny American spirit sort of aesthetic, because again, how was this country founded? Yes, it was, everyone knows the 13 colonies, whatever. But one of the primary reasons that the colonies wanted to leave England or leave the rule of the crown was because England was getting really upset that settlers, much like settlers today, coming from Israel going into Palestine, were independently going into native territories and starting war skirmishes, burning down villages. And when the crown was like, y'all got to stop doing that because we literally cannot pay for a massive war against the indigenous nations, the states, the likes of George Washington, were like, well, it's kind of our destiny to take over this place, so we're going to do that.
Yeah.
So just for the bottom already, you have one part indigenous genocide and then the mandate to maintain slavery. Because now take it with a grain of salt, just because I don't remember off the top of my head, but at that point England was already sort of moving, or had already moved away from what we understand is the Atlantic slave trade. So
the abolitionist movement was slowly gaining steam, slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. But there was already, either way, there was already discrepancy there. So one of the only times England had a tiny little bit of a dub of maybe we shouldn't do this, but the Americans wanted to double down on that and say, no, we're a nation of slave owners who want to colonize this land and continue to do so, and we're not going to just sit here while England dictates from over there. It wasn't just about tea or taxation representation. It was about, let's take this continent away from these other people. So when you're promoting American communism, you're still promoting the settler state.
Yeah, and it ignores so much of just communist history and lessons that we have learned over these past 100 years. What is dialectical historical materialism, right? Dialectical historical materialism, we look at the past and we use that as lessons to find a scientific way to do revolution and learn rules on how to do revolution and things like that. What we've learned over the past 100 years is that, first of all, this nationalistic socialism does not work, right? This is why the Bolsheviks had to split with the Second International, which tried to do this nationalistic socialism and work with their states in World War I and their national bourgeois. And also, what is the biggest lesson that Lenin gave us is that we need a disciplined vanguard party that does not get enmeshed within the hegemony of the proletariat. We have to guide the proletariat, right? What MAGA communism does is tailism, right? And what we should try to do is vanguard party that guides the proletariat. And what this basically means is that we have to look at the proletariat, right, the workers, as they actually are, not as how we want them to be. And the workers right now, there's only a very small section of the working class that is class conscious and that does recognize the class struggle. The rest of the working class is enveloped within this capitalistic hegemon ideology. And so if the working class is left to its own to do revolution, what it ends up doing is it forms trade unions. These trade unions get incorporated within the state, right? So usually the Democratic Party, and all revolutionary potential goes away from them. It gets fizzled out. It gets dissolved. And so what Lenin said was we need a disciplined vanguard party that leads the workers to revolution, recognizes, unites the working class, recognizes its internal divisions, right? Black, white, Hispanic, gay, and gives them class consciousness that trade unionism and that reformism is not enough. What does MAGA communism do? It says, let's get enveloped within the working class's hegemon. Let's get distracted by the work that the working class wants to do, which is MAGA. And by doing that, your movement is going to fizzle out. Your movement is going to become enveloped within the working class's distraction. And this is not to say that we are superior to the working class. This is not to say that the working class is inferior to us and that we're so much more intelligent. It's just to work from the reality of what the working class is. And MAGA communism doesn't want to do that. They want to get enveloped within the working class's distracted hegemony, which is MAGA.
Right. Yeah. One thing I want to point out that I think a lot of people, especially on these online places that you and I are part of, don't understand, and the ACP definitely doesn't understand, is the vanguard is not. I'll put it to you this way. And I don't mean like you literally, but like you are not the vanguard. Okay, you don't just wake up one day and say, I'm the vanguard now. The vanguard is essentially chosen over time as they show and display their ability to guide the proletariat in the correct line, in the correct direction. And I see so many of these people online, they think they're the next Lenin, they're the next Che, they're the next fucking Trotsky, they're the next Stalin, whoever. You are not the guy. And when I see these ACP buffoons, you can see that they truly believe that, or maybe not truly believe because we can get into the specifics of their grift, but they're at least trying to promote the idea that they are going to be the ones who are going to do it all and lead the revolution. But they're not. And we could see that within the first few, it's what, been 48 hours of their existence, how they are even already lying about the amount of support that they actually have. So do you want to get into a little bit of like what is the actual ACP, like outside of like we talked about MAGA communism, but like who they are and what they're seeking to do?
Yeah, let's go over the leaders because you went over that in your video. Eddie Liger, Jackson Hinkle, and then Haas are the three founders. So what are the issues with these founders?
Yeah. Okay. So I can talk about I'll sort of talk about them, I guess, in the order that I came to interact with all of them, or heard about them at least. So, just like a lot of people, I got involved in well, I'll go back even farther. So, as I talked to you, Priya, about this at some point. So, like my introduction to communism was basically like I was always I was a Democrat liberal by default, just growing up. But my parents, they're refugees from Guatemala during the Civil War. So like I already had a pretty like ingrained understanding of like American interventionism, American exceptionalism, yada yada yada. So when I was in college, I didn't know what communism was, but I liked the memes and all those pages and whatever. I had a pretty strong sense of justice, at least that I thought at the time. And then as I got older, when the pandemic happened and I got on TikTok, and I started to hear people talk about communism outside of just memes. And that's when I started getting really like into it, reading and interested in whatever. So one of the first people that I encountered was Eddie Liger Smith, or otherwise known as Midwestern Marx, part of the Midwestern Marx Institute. And originally, I liked them a lot. In retrospect, it was pretty bare bones, but not that by itself, not necessarily a bad thing. But very basic, like this is communism. This is what these people believed in. Read this book, that kind of stuff. So that really helped facilitate me, like, understanding, like, okay, you know, there's actually groups of people who want to do this thing, who want to build a better life for people, yada, yada, yada. As time went on, and as I mentioned this in my video, as myself and I think a lot of people at the same time who all kind of got introduced to this TikTok sphere at this all the same time during the pandemic, as people began to develop deeper understandings of Marxism and then combining that with things like intersectionality, began to understand that there was a lot of holes in what him and his group were saying, because there was already the signs at the beginning of only really appealing to the white working class. And it started with like little things with like, you know, Eddie would talk about how you have to go down to like the John Deere factory and talk to workers who might not ideologically agree with you. That's fine. But then there started to be these little holes where he would say things like baristas aren't actually workers, which started to display like
bad understanding
holes in his idea of like class and the proletariat and whatever. And then when he started posting on Twitter, things where he was basically flirting with the ideas of like being anti-wokeism. Like, why are we talking about, you know, LGBTQ rights? Why are we talking about having antagonisms between different races within the proletariat? Like, we should just kind of get along. And while perhaps maybe in the beginning that was meant well, that is his intrinsic whiteness was showing that he didn't understand why there would be these class antagonisms. He didn't understand why intersectionality is so important. Why intersectionality is so important is because if you don't understand the makeup of the proletariat, you don't understand why certain groups of people are part of the proletariat or the lumpen proletariat, why Black, Hispanic people, South Asian people makes up such large portions of the proletariat, and they're kept in those positions, then you're not going to understand what the future of the country or nation is going to need, or that these people are going to have to make decisions on their own that are going to lead into more class antagonisms within the proletariat, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was sort of, you know, my introduction to Eddie. And then as the years went on, Eddie began to start talking with people like Haz Infrared or Haz al-Din. So Infrared, another so-called institute, I think really started getting popular about 2 years ago, I would say.
2020, 2021-ish, let's say.
Okay.
I'm not familiar, but I think that's the time.
Okay. And Haas kind of exploded on the scene because he was very verbose, very non-PC, like, you know, say it how it is kind of guy, trying to sort of push the narrative of like Marxism, what, you know, obviously we know now he's not talking about Marxism, but using Marxist aesthetic to basically be like, oh, you know, like communism is a man's ideology, and trying to sort of get the sector of the proletariat who would be interested in somebody who can talk like that. But again, fundamentally misunderstanding the concepts of intersectionality, the importance of race, the importance of LGBTQ rights. So as they began to talk more and more, Haz would go on other people's podcasts. I know he did a podcast with friends of Collective, historically, with like Lumpy Luis and Esha. And he really just began to display like an inability to, you know, like talk to women or like people of color, and without basically like displaying some pretty hardcore incel tendencies, and just this sort of chest beating nonsense. So it really wasn't until we get to the third guy that kind of synthesized this whole disaster, which is Jackson Hinkle. So Jackson Hinkle, as I bring up in my video, he's a rather young guy who got his sort of start in media career, being, you know, a right winger. It's tweeting about right wing, you know, talking points, videos, being a Zionist, being anti-Palestinian, anti-LGBTQ, saying anti-Black statements. I mean, really, whatever you could think a conservative teenager would say is what he was saying. And he got popular for doing that. He ended up on, you know, the likes of like the Alex Jones shows. I think he talked with Ben Shapiro at some point.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about that, but like he
like
started
4chan or had a platform, basically.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he just began to do more and more of that. And really, I actually just saw a video where where Jackson was advocating against the abolition of private property. So like this guy is no communist at all. I mean, none of them are, but Jackson in particular isn't. He's a right winger. Him and Haas particularly, you know, they like people like um Heidegger, for Martin Heidegger, who was a Nazi, Alexander Dugin, who's also a Nazi. Like that's who they like. That's who they want to emulate.
Yeah, Dugin is such a wild thing because what is he? He is just a modern day Nazi, fascist,
Anti-communist
philosopher who uses the Soviet aesthetic to appeal to like very confused Russians, right? Like very confused Russians who are like, the Soviet Union was so great and we lost all our power. And he likes the Soviet Union for all the wrong reasons. Not its anti-imperialism, proletarian internationalism, not its amazing workers' rights, yada yada. He just likes it because Soviet Union was strong. Soviet Union was when we were great, right? It's almost that Third Reich, Second Reich, Third Reich, right? Like golden age of the Nazis, the Reich. He turns the Soviet Union into a former Reich of Russia, and Russia must restore to its former greatness. It's insane. But continue. Sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah. So basically, you know, it's in October 2023. You know, Israel escalated its genocide against the Palestinians.
Yeah.
And that was an opportunity for Jackson Hinkle to get on places like Twitter and TikTok and began to speak out against, you know, Israel and the Zionist state. And he got very popular very fast amongst, you know, liberals and even, unfortunately, some communists who were like, oh, he's saying all the right things. You know, he's saying, you know, free Palestine, rah, rah. Mostly because he's an anti-Semite and also because he's a grifter, right?
Yeah, it's amazing how many of these anti-Semites, bad actors, bastards have just become complete opportunists. And because people are so unfortunately unable to do critical thinking, you know, my ex-girlfriend, she's Arab, and she said so many Arabs have been just following just these raging white supremacists because they're anti-Zionist. And she said, like, they don't realize that they hate Arabs too. It's insane how people are having such a hard time having nuance, realizing who the bad actors are, who's dishonest, who's not on our side, and who's not on our side are these racist, anti-Semitic, anti-Zionists who are anti-Black, anti-intersectionality, anti-proletarian internationalism and class war, and just dislike Israel, but for all the wrong reasons, that they're Jews, basically.
Right, exactly. Yeah, 100%. There's a disturbing amount of people who follow that line of thinking. Jackson being one of them. So, basically, Jackson got more and more popular. He started doing streams with Haas and Fared, and Eddie began to flirt with Haas and Jackson more and more. Until recently, I would say maybe 2 months ago, Eddie put out an article called "In Defense of MAGA Communism." This is coming off the heels of where a lot of people were criticizing Eddie for flirting with MAGA communism, but he would deny that he was part of it or that he promoted it or anything like that. So he comes out with this article, In Defense of MAGA Communism. It's goofy. I don't know if you've read it, but it's basically a whole article about how he believes MAGA communism is correct because his wrestling coach was a white MAGA worker, and his wrestling coach is a really good guy. And I'm like, I'm sure he is a really good guy, but like, he's still a white supremacist if he believes in this. Like, that's the like, it's so silly, dude. You have to go read it. But anyway, so that came out. Everyone clowned on him, and that I think he took that personally because then we get to basically 2-3 days ago. Well, we don't know when this video is going to pop up. So what is it now? It's so like what, July 21st, 22nd.
Yeah.
All of a sudden on Twitter, Jackson, Eddie, Haas, all these people. Actually, you know what? There's more context I have to add here. My fault. So we have an understanding, Jackson, Haas, and Eddie. So what was happening while this was congealing was in the United States right now, there is the CPUSA, the Communist Party of the United States of America. That's a whole other conversation to have about them. But basically, what happened is the CPUSA dissolved. I believe it's one of their Austin chapters or the Austin chapter. For essentially, they were advocating for a lot, much more overt revolutionary activities. The CPUSA basically said, "We don't support this. We'll dissolve you." So that was already controversy within our spheres. So the ACP, or these goofballs, basically came out and decided this is our time to launch a new party, the American Communist Party, the ACP. So they announced it on Twitter in a rather goofy photo shoot, an AI-generated Ivato stock footage trailer for their party and founding document, which is 89% AI generated, as I've come to find out, if you run it through programs.
Yeah.
But basically, they came out and said, us and a bunch of CPUSA chapters from all over the country are coming together to form a new communist party, that is MAGA communism.
Yeah.
And it very quickly not only got clowned on, but it was so many of these chapters, if not all of them at this point, have come out and said, yeah, we didn't sign anything. We're not part of these guys. So, they're just straight up lying. And the reason why they're lying is because they're trying to get you to offer them material support. And at the end of the day, it comes down to money. Coincidentally, it's funny because we were joking about it, that they were going to start a commie coin, like an NFT or whatever. And then they did. Now, apparently, allegedly, it wasn't them. It was someone playing a goof. But I'm on God. I'm not going to believe that because, you would do that. Because if you could say that it wasn't them, but then people are saying it is, and then they already did this. They sent out cease and desist letters to basically tell people to stop saying that they are doing commie coin or they'll sue you. It's a scheme. It's a grift. It's a hoodwink. They're trying to sell shit. They're trying to sell you their literature, their commie coin, their ideology
Allegedly.
to make
Allegedly
money. Allegedly. I don't believe that, but right. Exactly. So it's just a bunch of goof troops, really, who are deeply unserious and have a very loose, if at all, understanding of Marxism. I would say probably not at all. Maybe very basic stuff. Because even our enemies will have an understanding of ideologies, but they're not interested in worker liberation. Not at all.
Yeah. The CPUSA is such a disappointing party because regularly a lot of the local branches, like I know some people who organize with our heads of the local branches in Texas, are such genuine communist revolutionaries, but the national branch is so infiltrated with liberals and chauvinists that it is just sad. Like the local branches are so organic, and my timeline has been inundated with like local branches of CPUSA talking about no, we did not sign the American Communist Party, whatever. But going back to all of that, intersectionality is such an important part of communism, right? Is such an important part of our ideology, because we have to realize that just taking Marx and Engels' analyses of Europe, and just completely going off of the class analysis between proletariat and bourgeois, ignores how internally divided the working class is along racial lines, along sexual lines, trans, gay, LGBTQ, straight, along gender lines, male, female, and along just ethnic, racial, all these lines. The American working class and the world working class is so divided, and if we as communists have any chance to unite against the bourgeois, it is to unite and close the gap between these internal contradictions between the working class and what the fascists and what the bourgeois and what the Republicans, who are also fascists and whatever, and even the Democrats want to do is to create divisions between these sections of working class, right? Either it's the Republicans and the fascists who do like a white is right kind of ideology, and that everybody else is bad and straight white man is right, or the Democrats who play off the internal proletariat of America and the global proletariat. You should care more about American trans girls and American people of color than people of color in Palestine. And so communism has to say, no, we are not free until we are all free. And we have to listen to the issues of the minorities, of the oppressed people within intersectionality, in an intersectional way. Because what is communism? It is a liberation of not only what is the biggest support base of communism, it is the most affected people by communism. It is the people at the bottom of the totem pole of communism. Who were the biggest support base of communism in Tsarist Russia? Jews, Jewish people who were having pogroms done against them. That's why so many of them were communists, not because communism is a Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy. Who were the biggest supporters of communism in Cuba? Right? Afro-Cubans, Cubans, right? Just these black people who were second-class citizens under the Batista regime, who had no rights, who were segregated from society like Jim Crow. And so who have been the biggest supporter of communism in America? Black people, Black nationalists, right? So we cannot ignore the internal divisions of the working class. There's this great article by Luna Oy on medium.com called Why Communists Have to Be Intersectional. And I recommend everybody do that. Hold on. Could you hold on for a second?
Go ahead.
Yes. What was I supposed to?
They're gonna see my message. I said you're going to message it on.
No, yeah, it's too late. It's too late. I'm sorry. I'm on a video call. Sorry about that, but yeah, it's just intersectionality is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. I'll definitely check that article out. So I think one thing we should clarify for maybe people who don't know. So like, we're talking about how like, the ACP are white nationalists, but then you mentioned, Black nationalism. So like when we're talking about nationalism within a colonized state, so like the United States being a settler colony, or like a place like Niger, which is, part of neo-colony, when the indigenous of that country are seeking to liberate themselves from oppression, from the government and economic system that crushes them, that is a nationalist movement based in liberation. But when you're part of an ethnic group that is the primary oppressor and the primary portion that benefits from that oppressing, your nationalism has no room in a liberation movement. So even amongst the proletariat in the United States, when you have white nationalists, you have white people who are part of the proletariat still at a social and a cultural level benefit from imperialism, benefit from the other portions of the proletariat, the Black, brown, Hispanic, indigenous, whatever, being oppressed.
Yeah.
So when you have Black nationalists talking about New Africa or the Chicano movement or land back for the northern indigenous, like when you have those people discussing these things, the reason why they have that legitimacy is because those are the people who are oppressed by not only sectors of the white proletariat, but the white bourgeois. So it is for white people in the proletariat, it is their job to aid in the assistance in these liberation movements if they are accepted into them, not to seek out their own, well, we're going to make our own a white enclave.
Yeah.
Particularly this comes from because when you look at the history of race and race science, it's very clear that whiteness isn't real. It's a label to place one above others. as opposed to like me being quote unquote Hispanic or being Chicano. I'm indigenous to Central America, where we're from here. You know what I mean? So like, as opposed to a white person, who's French, like you and your ancestry, you have no. I don't want to say you don't have any place, but like your entire reason, the entire reason I'm here and you're here are two different things. You, somewhere along the line, benefited from the oppression of our inability and our suppression to form our own nation, our own interdependence. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you are. And this is not to say that white workers are not proletarian, right? I don't think either of us agree with Jay Saki's analysis that white workers are not proletarian. But it is to say,
Right.
well, we're in agreement, right? Or
Yeah. We're in
Okay. I didn't want to speak for you, but it is to say that the we cannot ignore how differently capitalism affects Black people than white people, right? Black people are incarcerated at higher rates. Black people have less life expectancy. Black people are treated worse by medical staff. Black people make up the majority of our prisoners. Black people have higher rates of poverty. Black people are discriminated against in job hiring because their names sound too Black. And so when we make a false equivalency by saying, oh, well, why can't we appeal to the white working class if we do Black nationalism? It is such a false equivalency that ignores this history of slavery, of Jim Crow, of just systemic racism that has never gone away. And so we cannot say Black nationalism is the same as white nationalism. Black nationalism is by its nature communistic. Black nationalism eventually, leads to a person having a Marxist, Leninist analysis of the world. Think of Nkrumah from Ghana. I butchered his name most likely, or the ANC. Nelson Mandela, who worked very heavily with the communists and Castro in the Soviet Union, or Thomas Sankara from Burkina Faso. So Black nationalism and minority nationalism, and Eddie's conception of land back is so bad. If you want to learn about land back, the article I was mentioning before, it's actually Why Communists Should Care About Land Back by Luna Oy, which is a great read. Land back is not about Native Americans throwing white people off of their former colonial lands. Land back is a dialectical movement, right? We won't know what it's going to look like in the end, just like we don't know what full communism is going to look like in the end. It's going to move along and process as material conditions go. But it is a dialectical movement that seeks, one, to empower the Native American indigenous communities, and that is giving back names to places, right? So if an area used to have a Native American name, we give that name back. It seeks to do environmental justice using Native American practices, and it seeks to give public land that nobody is using back to Native Americans. And it is not a petty privatization movement. It is a movement based in socialism, in liberating the Native Americans, and also giving indigenous people investment within their communities, more sovereignty, and being able to educate people within their own languages. And so it is very much like how the Soviet Union dealt with minorities, which is they gave them their own semi-autonomous socialist republics that were sort of in the Soviet Union, not in the Soviet Union. It was this play on autonomy and not autonomy, but it had affirmative action, and it just, in these semi-autonomous unions where they were able to teach people in their own languages and they got heavily invested in. And that is the beautiful thing about land back, is it is so adaptable. It is not how Eddie says, Native Americans grabbing guns and boom, 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 boom. As Native Americans have said, we do not want to do unto you what you did unto us, right? Nobody wants to do that. And of course, there are different colonial aspects, right? Like Palestine, which is in like half Manifest Destiny, can have that, we're going to push all the settlers out with guns and things like that. But in a completed settler colonialist project with so few, like our percentage of our population of Native Americans is so small, we cannot expect them to just grab guns and boom, boom, boom their way into liberation. They're going to have to work with everything. and that includes Black people,
Yeah.
Latinos, what have you.
Yeah. So I actually I brought up the tweet that I put in my video, and then I want to read part of a comment I got on my on that video. So the tweet that I use as example for Eddie and his inability to understand indigenous problems and land back is so it's quote, "Please tell me how it would be good for indigenous communities to take up arms, start fighting against white," and he put settlers in quotes. "How will that lead to anything besides death and destruction on both sides? Indigenous people aren't going to fight a senseless war on behalf of annoying college kids who tokenize them in order to push race essentialist ideas on Twitter and yell at people for questioning what land back is." So
Yeah.
he said that, and that's its own nonsense. But part of a comment I got here, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they were talking about when I was talking about that in the video.
Mhm.
They said, Eddie isn't arguing against indigenous people. He says that class interests are the chief force. That doesn't mean the indigenous struggles of past and present go unaddressed. It just means that you don't frame indigenous people as being against white people. So I'm push back a little bit, because when Eddie is saying that the class interest is the chief force, that by itself is not incorrect, because yes, we're talking about the class antagonism between the proletariat and the bourgeois. But again, when you don't understand what these classes are made up of and why they are made up of the way that they are, then you are fundamentally not going to understand at all what these individual sectors of people are going to need. I mean, I would even argue that more than likely the indigenous population of the United States, when I'm specifically referring to like northern indigenous, people like on reservations and stuff,
Yeah.
are lumped in proletariat. We're not even talking about the proletariat anymore. We're talking about something else at this point. So if you don't understand that, you're not going to understand their individual needs. Now, when the commenter says it just means that you don't frame indigenous people as being against white people, you are correct to Preet that, like, yes, fundamentally, people don't want to be just like anti-white or anti, a regular American. But at the same time, this is not an issue for Eddie to be speaking on. Like, you are not an indigenous person. So, like, you're not going to have you already displaying that you don't have an understanding of the proletariat makeup. So who are you to be coming here and now saying, well, this is what you guys need to do? That's not what the vanguard does. The vanguard goes where they're needed and guides. It doesn't just say, well, you guys are this way and you just shouldn't do that. You see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make sense. He's not the authority to speak on what is or isn't going to be the correct action when it comes to the different groups of color of people here, especially when you don't understand the class makeup.
Yeah. It also speaks to the importance of mass line work, right? I know before we were talking about how the vanguard leads the proletariat, but the vanguard also needs to keep its pulse on the proletarian, right? And mass line work means going to your Native American community and saying, what do you guys need? What are your biggest issues? How can I form a party line that addresses your biggest issues? Going to your tenant union and saying, what do you guys need? What is your biggest issues? And I think by refusing to listen to Native Americans' perspectives and refusing to educate yourself, it's okay. It's okay to be ignorant accidentally. Like I've been ignorant about Native American issues. I've been ignorant about Black issues. You don't think I said stupid things when I was like 5 or 6 or like 11 or 13? Of course I did. Of course I was ignorant. But it's the refusing to sit down, recognize that you're fucking wrong, and listen to other people's perspectives and not speak on them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm sure I could watch a TikTok I made from a year ago and be like, damn, why'd I say that? That was stupid, But like, I even sent the video to Eddie because we're friends on Discord, and I literally said, I'm like, hey man, it's not too late. Because like you need to sit down and you need to get it through your fucking head, bro. The like, stop. And that's the thing. Like, I'm gonna be totally honest. And I don't know if you want to cut it out. But like, maybe it's the parasocial aspect that I still have. But sometimes when I watch these people interact with each other, I'm like, I just think he's dumb. I don't think he's the mastermind here. You know what I mean? The mastermind is Jackson Hinkle. But like I'm like, I think he just doesn't know. And when he gets defensive and now he's surrounded by these yes men who are like, no, Eddie, no, it's fine, you're fine. Don't listen to these woke people. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, God damn it, bro. Like, what are you doing, you goof troop? Like,
yeah, he's a little bit of a victim here, is what you're saying. A little bit. Oh, just the tiniest. He's a useful idiot, basically. I won't say victim. Yeah. Has he responded to what you sent him?
No, I don't think he will. I know. All right, so here's the funny thing. So my video ended up in one of the MAGA communist discords.
Yeah.
And someone I know who is, you know, an inside man was like, hey, so they're talking about your video and they're talking about the like to view ratio and they're like, damn, it's actually pretty good. Like, I'm like, damn, I cooked that hard, and they were like, we don't even know what to say.
Oh, that is sad. That is so sad. Oh my God. Oh. It's such a I'm so sorry to say this, but it's such a clown show. You know, you were goofing on them in their trailer. It's just a bunch of these goofballs in suits. Where the fuck are you in suits? Right? Like, first of all, like let's just wear normal clothing at a golf course holding up what was the text? We are not afraid, something like that.
Oh. So it was a bit of an inside joke for me. But I don't remember what's the original picture, but the picture that I only showed that one is photoshopped, where Haas is holding a sign that says "We demand to be taken seriously."
Okay.
Which is from a show called Arrested Development. So like I just thought that was funny. I don't remember what the original.
Oh, okay. But it's just so goofy. It's just so goofy. And like, yeah, God, they've got one minority there, you know, one black guy, and he just looks so incredibly uncomfortable.
He's super uncomfortable.
He just looks incredibly uncomfortable. It is just, it's a mess.
Okay, because that's the thing, right? Okay, so you're trying to appeal to you're trying to convince people that you're appealing to the proletariat. First off, you're on a golf course. That you're at a country club, and I'm being serious. That it's at a golf course. I'm not making that up.
How many?
So it's like, first off, country clubs are expensive. Golf clubs are expensive.
Yeah.
Second off, why did you guys dress the way that you did? Because this is how I know. All right, so like I always say on Collective, shout out to Aria Serpa and Lumpy Luis, because they bring such a different perspective to Collective, aesthetic wise, content wise, you know, support wise. I know they would never let the Collective Central Committee out of the house looking like that. Are you crazy? Like elastic pants, like unmismatched clothing, suits that don't fit. And it's just like, what are you guys doing? Like, you're here to show that you guys are apparently professional revolutionaries. You guys look like assholes. Like, did you not pick up anything from the Black Panthers and their trip? Do you not understand how important aesthetics is when you're trying to captivate an audience? You're trying to get people to look at you and be like, we can trust these people, or these people are serious. Like, you just look like a bunch of kids.
Yeah, if we look at parties, sorry for cutting you off, but if we look at other communist parties and their promotional material, the PSL, they're usually wearing like a hoodie that says like PSL. That's the most they're ever doing. CPUSA, like anytime I look at a CPUSA post, it's just guys in like normal clothing. Like, as problematic as CPUSA is. And then these guys, they should have picked a mini golf center, right? Like, a mini golf is a proletarian sport. Golf is bourgeois. Like I think me and you can agree with that. Golf is reactionary, but mini golf, that's going to lead the revolution, right?
Yeah, but like unironically, yeah, because like mini golf centers are like families go there, couples go there. It's fun,
very accessible.
Glizzies and ice cream. It's usually not very expensive. You know, it's you know, yeah, dad got off work early. Let's go, you know, putt around, whatever. Not take it that seriously, but golf is a rich man's sport.
It is.
So like, a rich white man's sport. So like, what are you saying when you're trying to display this? It's either at worst a very, very poorly thought out, and at best, like it's intentional. And I don't know, man. Sometimes, like, again, like I have to maybe unpack my own thing here, but like I was saying to some of my friends, I was like, maybe they really just don't know what they gotten themselves into, especially like as like, so to get a little serious for a second. So like when the National Socialists are on their rise to power, and Germany, where people were either going down the Marxist line or the fascist line, like when the Night of Long Knives happened, which is when the Nazis went after communists and trade unionists, in the streets. It's like, you guys are one, you have to understand that what we're doing here, while for now anti-capitalist media and podcasts, whatever, is permissible, there will come a day, either in our lifetime or after, where it won't be. So like what we're doing, what we're talking about, the people who we meet, is being monitored. People are watching. When you kick the hornet's nest enough, you're going to get the attention of state actors who will do things to stop you.
Yeah.
And so when you're promoting not only the goof troop ideology, but are now getting even more attention of the authorities, because even though they are right wing, the funny thing about fascism is fascists infight all the time. So if there is a adventurous fascist group within a fascist country, they can fight very easily for control. So like, I don't think they know what they're doing. And I do wonder, like, if something may happen to them, because I don't think they've thought it through.
Yeah, I think the thing about fascism is that we so often say that fascism is a last minute preservation of the bourgeois state and its power, when shit hits the fan and capitalism is no longer able to contain its contradictions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the state loves the fascists, right? It's a shaky alliance. They're useful tools, right? Like it's not that the state is absolutely the bourgeois are absolutely ecstatic to be allying with the fascists. Is always a very shaky alliance. And so that's what allows so much fascist infighting. That's what allows these fascist movements to very often, sometimes even be repressed by the state, right? Once in a while, the FBI or CIA, and it's so rare, of course, they'll always go after left-wing movements more than the fascists. They'll always turn a more blind eye to fascists than us. But once in a while, they will infiltrate, say, the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys leader, who is a Cuban American, by the way, which is so fucking funny, got outed for being an FBI informant, right? So the state sees fascists as a last resort, an absolute last resort that they are more than happy to once in a while suppress whenever they get too rowdy, until the state enters a mode of production, a crisis point where they eventually need them, right? So it's a play, it's a tug and pull, it's a Tom and Jerry sort of situation. But if you watch the Tom and Jerry movie, they eventually become friends, to bring this weird analogy together.
And so there's a reboot, and then they're enemies again, right? Exactly. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. It's just, I guess, going back to what I was saying before we started recording, like I was driving home from work this morning, and I felt like a real visceral, like, emotional response, and I was like, I'm sorry, but we can't let these goofballs like go run around out here and represent Marxism, represent our ideology. Like, we have to counter it.
I've been seeing so many people say this is what Stalinism is, quote unquote. This is what Marxist-Leninism is, quote unquote. And it's like, no, we are not with these disgusting people.
No, we're not. Not at all. And like, this is why it's good we're having these conversations. It's good that we're talking about it within our circles, making videos and TikToks. And then, how do I navigate this without getting a cease and desist letter? If it comes down to, let's say counter protesting, then that's what will have to happen, But these people cannot be allowed to soil already something that is vilified by the bourgeois state for their own grift. We can't allow it to happen. It has to be countered.
Everything in this podcast is alleged. Everything in this podcast is alleged. We're not making any true legalistic claims here.
Pokepreet's 4th episode gets sued.
Yeah, but why do you think American communism, MAGA communism, is happening in America right now? Like, why is it even a movement, right? Like, why does it even have a little bit of support, right? It does have a little bit of support. Why do you think
Yeah,
people are calling for this?
So I think there's a lot of factors. I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, where like capitalism is very unnatural. Capitalism gaslights us into thinking that society has always lived this way. Human animals have always lived the way that we have right now, but that's not true. Since our onset of a species, we have always been cooperative and always been sharing of resources, living in these large family units. We did that for the majority of our human existence.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward, to about, 500 years ago, where you start having the proto stirrings of capitalism versus today, where we have, the highest stage of capitalism, imperialism, where now you have the resources of the world locked behind a paywall. And because capitalism is so unsustainable and always declines, you now have people who are looking to the future and not seeing it working out for them anymore, particularly the American dream, so-called American dream. And now with the influx of modern technology, now it's so easy for people, reactionaries from all over the country, to talk to each other and be like, damn, like, I can't afford gas, I can't afford this, like, it's because it's those freaking gays, or it's brown people, or whatever, they come up with these misconceptions, or are fed it by mainstream media to believe that. So when it comes to like the communist aesthetic, and this is something that I'm coming to terms with right now, I had to unmutual a lot of people in the last couple of days who I thought were pretty cool, but as soon as they saw ACP, they're like, yep, I'm behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It is telling me that we aren't particularly doing as good of a job as we could be. We need to be doing more. We need to be countering. We need to be educating even more, because there are people who do not have an actual understanding of Marxism. They have attached themselves to an aesthetic. And you see this happening a lot, because people want to feel that sense of belonging. People want to be part of something bigger. Mm-hmm. So as they're seeing society getting, worse or declining, they look for family. They look for a group of people. They look for an aesthetic to be a part of. Some people use religion, some people use political ideology, whatever. In this case, political ideology. So you get a lot of people, disenfranchised Americans, who are looking for something to hold on to. But, straight up Nazbol Nazi stuff is, frowned upon by, society, at least on the surface level. So they go to, what's the opposite? Well, Marxism, communist aesthetic, militantism, whatever. So once something like MAGA communism pops up, you get a lot of these people who want to jump right into that because they never really had a full understanding or even a basic understanding of Marxism. They were just sort of looking for that community and that aesthetic. So because they never had that understanding, they haven't done the work to unpack their misogyny or racism or homophobia or whatever. So when there's an aesthetic now that's accepting of those flaws within that person, they jump right into it.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest contradictions that the American left has to contend with is that we are a settler colonialist country, right? And we are a country built on white supremacy, indigenous genocide, slavery, imperialism, neocolonialism. We cannot separate that from our leftist movements. And I think because these identities and these things are just so personally tied to our own identities, because of the hegemon that we have been socialized into, becoming a leftist is really, in many ways, like becoming a communist is deconstructing yourself, challenging yourself, deconstructing your own image of yourself. And I think so many people it's such a visceral, painful, in some ways, process. It's been painful for me sometimes to just look at myself and say, am I sexist? Am I racist? Am I, am I, do I do this? Do I do that? And when you accept that, you are able to become a much better communist. But I think it's just so hard for the American left to do that because we are socialized into thinking that we are the greatest nation on earth, that white supremacy does not exist, that it may have existed, but it went away after 1964. And that, whenever we're reading Marx or Engels, unfortunately, they never really mentioned the internal division of the working class. That is a later analysis that other people had to do. They did mention it mildly, right? They mentioned how British workers were so much more different than Irish workers. They mentioned that in passing. They mentioned how capitalism was built off of African blood and indigenous blood, like things like that. But since this is a later analysis that has had to be learned over time, when people are reading Marx and Engels and even Lenin to a little bit, and they're not directly mentioning these, it's so hard for people to go past this binary and become class reductionist.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're socialized to be an individual, to be all you can be, you can do anything if you set your mind to it, if you pick up your bootstraps. When you start thinking of a collective, of humanity as a whole, as your community as a whole, there's a very real animal reaction to like, no, but what about me? Instead of realizing that if you take care of other people in your community, they take care of you.
Yeah, and it just breaks you. In essence, to become a good communist is just to break who you used to be and become a new man with a new understanding of the world around him and of himself. You are no longer an American. You are now part of the international working class. Like that. It is such a I am racist and I have to work on that. I am sexist. I have to work on that. That is such a painful self-reflection that is so hard for so many people.
I think for me, like in particular, it was realizing how people even close to me, family-wise, relationship-wise, friend-wise, it was now no longer compatible. Because liberals can let just things kind of roll off of them, but like hearing casual racism, casual homophobia, or sort of dismissing of like the Palestinian genocide or things like that, or people who don't understand that like this isn't just a hobby for us. This isn't just something to talk about or like a philosophical exercise. This is like you said, a reconstructing of who we are as people to join the international workers of the world. That we recognize that we're just a cog in the greater humanity, and we need to be doing that work to facilitate a society that can be better, free and fair and equal for all.
Yeah.
And so like when I would meet people or family or like I said, relationships, whatever, like these things started to become with certain individuals very incompatible because they would see that I was doing the work. That doesn't mean I don't have more work to do, but I was doing the work, but they didn't want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know if you've ever had this happen. But like I would meet, people in my life would be like, why do you always, talk about X, Y, Z? And it doesn't mean I don't talk about anything that's, fun, but like, why are you like this basically? And it's like, because the world is unjust. And what does it say about, we're just going to sit here and let it happen that way? Like, I'm sorry, I refuse. And that's kind of why it goes back to like this feeling I was having earlier where I was like, I refuse to let these ACP commie, goof troops tarnish what we've been able to accomplish. It's not even a lot, but they have a potential to make it so much worse for so many people. And, that's why we have to counter it,
Yeah.
That's why I spent
such a dangerous trend. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm rambling, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry for cutting you off there. But yeah, it is really painful, to become a communist. And also, I think the thing is, to become a communist is to become a counter narrative to the system that everybody has been socialized into around you. And that is to accept injustice and to come up with catchy phrases that sort of get rid of both the system's guilt of it and also preserve the system, right? Oh, the Native Americans were savage and they played in dirt, and might makes right in history, right? Slavery happened, but we freed them in 1964, so black people should stop complaining. All these narratives, oh my God, the Palestinians are just over there. I only care about my own family and friends. All these narratives that people have been socialized into as communists, we run counter to, because we say no. We demand justice, that your explanations are not good enough for this world, and that you to represent one of the worst trends in ideological history, and that if we are to get any substantive justice, if we are to create an equitable world, if humanity is to survive itself, if humanity is to survive itself from climate catastrophe, if humanity is to survive itself from fascism and a fascist eco collapse, which is what humanity is currently headed towards, with that kind of thinking that you espouse with your stupidity that you've been socialized into, then we are going to have to demand justice for people who have not gotten justice for hundreds of years, since slavery, since indigenous genocide, since colonialism. And your kind of thinking is the kind of thinking that allowed SS guards to shove people into gas chambers, and your kind of thinking is what allowed some of the worst horrors against humanity, and we are not going to stand for that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Beautifully put. I really liked what you said, that counter narrative, because even at work, I was in the elevator with coworkers, and they were talking about how a state trooper was around or whatever. I work at a hospital. And I was like, ill, I don't give a fuck anymore, and I'm gonna get in trouble for it. But I was like ill, and they were like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You guys talk to the cops?" And they were like, "Yeah, da da da." And I was like, "Nah, man." And then we moved on or whatever. The conversation comes up again, and like one of my coworkers was like, I just cops are sexy or whatever, and I was like, liking the police is crazy. And she's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "A cop is a cop." And they were like, "Yeah, well, not all cops." And I said, "No, it is all cops. Like, I'm here to counter your narrative. I don't care anymore. Like, I'm not going to just, oh, so-and-so said something a little crazy. Like, no, we're not doing this anymore. Like,
absolutely,
you have to be embarrassed. I'm going to make you uncomfortable, because your laissez-faire attitude, and you may not even mean it because you don't even know better, but oh, not all cops, or haha, he's so nice. That's cool. That same state trooper will bust your head open if he's ordered to. I'm just letting you know right now.
Absolutely.
So you guys can have fun, but I don't talk to them, just as an example.
Yeah, and it's something that we all struggle with. I'll be honest, I struggle with it too, like cutting off people who are bad actors in my life. I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but eventually I have cut off so many people that were deeply racist and sexist, especially after October 7th. The second I started seeing people being pro-Israel, as bombs were being dropped, I was like, get the fuck out of here. Like, get the fuck out of my life, honest to God. Like, I do not want a person like that in my life. And, it's hard. It is very hard, but you just have to be true and honest to the person that you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we've talked about MAGA communism, its issues, American Communist Party, its issues. What is the alternative to MAGA communism? What should our movement be? What do you think, Ivan?
First, subscribe to Pokepreet, number one. To subscribe to KollectivTV. But jokes aside, right now, this is my thought, and this is a hot take for some. There are too many goddamn communist parties in this country. We got to stop. What you got to do is, even if they're liberals, if it's CPUSA, if it's FRSL, if it's the PSL, go PSL. If they are in your area, if they're not in your area, if you have the capacity to start a chapter, do it. We need people to actually hit these streets and start doing the work, to start talking to your neighbors, to start community building. If you're somebody who is differently abled and something like that would be more difficult for you, but you have a different subset of skills, whether it's being able to type or do a podcast or make TikToks or anything like that, make artwork, gardening, whatever, if you have whatever was in your capacity, everything counts. So maybe you can't be going and starting a new chapter, but you can make a TikTok or content or whatever, or repost, anything like that. It does matter. It matters a lot. We all need to be doing something. But those of you who have that capacity to be able to hit these streets, to start these chapters, to join these orgs on a local or wider regional level, you really need to be doing something like that. If you're a creative person, a musician, a movie maker, or whatever, and you are a communist, or you think you find this interesting or communist adjacent, there's so much literature that you can engage with and make something based off of that. We need the culture to change as well. We're all going to have different, like I said, abilities. Some people might be able to handle really long, drawn out communist meetings. Some people might be able to make propaganda. Like, we all have to find our niche and just do it. Really, there's really nothing else I can say. It's funny because like we always rag on the bootstrap mentality, but it kind of does get to a point where like, if you have the capacity, you really should. You really need to be out here.
And in being an organizer is so often glorified. It's boring. It's painful. It's not fun a lot of the time. There are fun parts. There is community. There is yada yada. But so often it is just boring, tedious shit. But it has to be done. It has to be done. We cannot sit around and allow this to happen. And I also think, to add on to that, we need. You were right. We have too many communist parties. We need them all to unite under a single banner, right? Like you can have your own individual communist party, but we need to be a united front. The right is a united front. The bourgeois are amazingly united. We need to unite under a common front. I don't care if you're Trotskyist or Stalinist. The time for that debate will be after the revolution, right? And that is not to allow in liberals to our movements, right? That's not to allow in bad actors to our movements, but it is just, we have to unite as one front for now, just like the Palestinians have done with their genocide in Israel, in China recently. 14 different factions, I believe, 13 to 14, have united. And these are factions that hate each other, that have went to war with each other, that have killed each other, and they're uniting because they recognize they have a greater enemy, that is the Zionist Western imperialist entity. And we have a greater enemy, and that is also the Zionist Western imperialist entity, though it's more Western imperialist capital in our context. Finally, it has to be intersectional. It has to be absolutely intersectional. We cannot be chauvinist. We cannot be white supremacist. We cannot be sexist. We cannot be homophobic.
Yeah.
I think you showed Haas's homophobia perfectly in your video when he grabbed a clip of him and he said this place was so gay, right? Like he used gay as an insult. How does that feel towards our LGBTQ? The LGBTQ community is our greatest support base in America. Trans people are most trans people I know are communists. Most trans people, the trans to Marxist-Leninism pipeline is a straight one. It's such a fast one. Yeah. And that is probably our biggest, it's one of our biggest support bases. We cannot ignore it.
Well, that's the thing, right? So like somebody like who follows Haas or Haas himself would, analyze like, he said this place is so gay, and he'd be like, oh, I hurt their feelings. That's not the point. The point is when you speak that way, you are alienating a sector of the proletariat. And if you are okay with doing that, that means you're not actually interested in uniting a proletariat. You're interested in serving yourself. That's the point that I'm trying to make with pointing out these flaws in these people and in their goof-ass ideology. It has to be intersectional. It cannot be white supremacist. White supremacy has done the most damage through the entire planet. From colonization to slavery in the modern age and even before that. We cannot afford to continue this to go on. It's you have to look in yourself, you have to unpack yourself, you have to deconstruct yourself and be the new communist who you are. Man, woman, whoever you are, they, them, just you, who you are, needs to be rebuilt. I have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. It doesn't just stop. You don't ever just do a point and you're like, I'm done. It's constant.
Ever evolving process, yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what I have to say about it.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation. Ivan, could you tell everybody where are the best places to find you, and do you have any closing remarks?
Sure. Okay. So it's KollectivTV on YouTube. If you just type that in, you'll find our channel where we have different groups of creators, myself posting video essays and our weekly podcast. You can follow Collective TV on TikTok. There's also Collective Re-Education on TikTok, which is our bi-weekly show where we kind of talk about Marxist 101 concepts, and also try to counter toxic narratives on TikTok, particularly when it comes to communism. My handle is Ivan De La Rosa 1917. So you can find me there on TikTok. Closing remarks. Like I said, we have to counter it. We have to counter this. We cannot afford these goofballs, no drip having ass, goobers to soil the work that we have been able to do. We cannot do that. You mind if I plug something, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So it's still a couple months away, but I've been working on a large project about the PSL, about the history of the PSL, where they're going, controversy of the PSL, really diving into that, the myths, the truths. It's sort of the general thesis is we have to work with what we have, and that doesn't justify things, but it means when we're talking about the annihilation of humanity due to eco-fascist collapse versus working with maybe some people who aren't the best, you have to look at things pragmatically, and you have to be serious about this. This isn't a popularity contest. This isn't about whether or not you heard a rumor and you just believe in it. It's also an exercise as even though, my friends will laugh because of what I say about Mao, but Mao said this, no investigation, no right to speak. It's an exercise in that you have to really seek out these answers, especially in the day of social media where anybody can say anything and people just believe it. Both in regards to but also both in regards to something being true and something absolutely not being true. You have to investigate, you have to analyze, you have to read.
I think the nature of online leftist discourse is, obviously there are so many genuine critiques of the PSL, but there are so many just these micro critiques about every single action that the PSL does that if we just listen to them, nothing ever happens, right? Like nothing ever happens with any movement because it gets so micro critiqued about everything that it does that we just get distracted.
Well, I'll mention a little bit more when we're done recording, but that's my closing remarks.
Pretty much, yeah. And guys, go follow KollectivTV. Go follow Ivan De La Rosa 1917. That's your handle, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and this has been a lovely conversation.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for coming on.
No worries.
This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you. What the fuck? Glory to Stalin, I barely... And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Mateus T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.